I'm 71 years old, and I need to tell you something I've kept buried for 43 years. What I did destroyed 3 lives, and the ending is something I never saw coming. My name is Nanny. I live alone now in a small apartment in Ohio. The walls are covered with photos of people who don't visit anymore. Every morning, I wake up and make tea for one. Every night, I eat dinner in silence. This is my punishment, and I deserve every second of it. But you need to understand how it started, because what happened in the end changed everything I thought I knew about guilt, karma, and justice. It was 1982. I was 28 years old, married to David for 6 years. We had 2 little girls, Emma and Sophie, 4 and 6 years old, beautiful kids with their father's blue eyes. David was a good man. He worked construction, came home tired every day, but he always made time to play with the girls before bed. He'd chase him around the house pretending to be a monster while they squealed and laughed. I should have been happy. We had a nice house. We had healthy children. We had enough money to get by. But I felt empty. I felt like I was watching my life happen to someone else. David would touch my hand at dinner, and I'd feel nothing. He'd kiss me good night, and I'd turn away. I told myself it was just marriage, that everyone felt this way after a few years, that the butterflies and excitement were just from movies and romance novels. Then Marcus came to stay with us. Marcus was David's younger brother, 25 years old, fresh out of the military, trying to figure out what to do with his life. David offered to let him stay in our spare room until he got on his feet. I said yes. I thought it would be nice for David to have his brother around. I thought it would be good for the girls to spend time with their uncle. Marcus was different from David. Where David was quiet and steady, Marcus was loud and unpredictable. He'd tell stories about places he'd been, things he'd seen. He'd sit at our kitchen table and talk for hours about countries I'd never heard of, adventures I couldn't imagine. When he laughed, it filled the whole house. When he looked at me, I felt like he actually saw me. Not just a wife, not just a mother, me. The first time it happened, it wasn't planned. David was working a night shift. The girls were asleep. Marcus and I were watching TV in the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the couch. I don't even remember what we were watching. I just remember the feeling in my chest, like something was pulling me toward him, like gravity. He turned to say something, and our eyes met, and suddenly his hand was on my face, and my hand was in his hair, and we were kissing. It was hungry and desperate and wrong, so wrong. But I didn't stop. I didn't pull away. I let it happen. I wanted it to happen. We went to his room, and I didn't think about David sleeping alone in a construction trailer somewhere. I didn't think about my daughters sleeping down the hall. I didn't think about anything except the way Marcus made me feel alive again. It kept happening. 2, 3 times a week, whenever David worked late or went out early, Marcus and I would find moments to steal. Quick touches in the hallway, kisses in the laundry room. We'd wait until David was snoring, and I'd sneak into Marcus's room like a teenager. I told myself I could control it, that it was just physical, that it didn't mean anything. But I was lying to myself. I was falling for Marcus. Maybe I was already in love with him. He made me laugh. He asked me questions about my dreams, my fears, my thoughts. He treated me like I mattered. David noticed something was off. He'd ask if I was okay, if something was wrong. I'd lie and say I was just tired, just stressed. He'd accept it and go back to work, and I'd feel guilty for about 10 minutes before Marcus would smile at me from across the room and the guilt would disappear. The girls loved their uncle. He'd build pillow forts with them, teach them card games, read them stories and funny voices. Watching him with my daughters made it worse somehow, because he was good with them, because they deserved better than a mother who was betraying their father under his own roof. 3 months went by like this, 3 months of lying and sneaking and pretending. I thought I could keep both lives going forever. I thought I was smart enough to manage it all. Then Marcus told me he loved me. We were in his room, middle of the afternoon. David was at work. The girls were at a friend's house. Marcus was lying next to me, tracing patterns on my shoulder with his finger. He said it so quietly I almost didn't hear him. "I love you, Nancy." My heart stopped because part of me wanted to say it back. Part of me wanted to leave David, pack up the girls, run away with Marcus and start a new life. But the other part of me knew how insane that was, how impossible, how it would destroy everyone. I didn't say anything. I just got dressed and left the room. That night at dinner, I couldn't look at anyone. Not David, not Marcus, not my daughters. I pushed food around my plate and pretended to listen to Emma talk about her day at school. David asked if I was feeling sick. I said yes. I went to bed early and cried into my pillow until I fell asleep. Marcus avoided me for a week after that. We'd pass in the hallway and he'd look away. The tension in the house was thick. David asked what was going on between Marcus and me, if we'd had a fight. I said no, another lie. Then one Saturday morning, David announced that he and Marcus were going fishing for the day. They'd leave at sunrise, be back by dinner. Just the two brothers spending time together like they used to when they were kids. I felt sick. I imagined Marcus telling David everything, confessing, asking for forgiveness. I imagined David's face when he found out. I imagined him looking at me with betrayal in those blue eyes, the same blue eyes my daughters had inherited. They left at 6 in the morning. I spent the whole day on edge, cleaning the kitchen 3 times, organizing closets, checking the clock every 5 minutes. The girls asked why I was acting weird. I told them Mommy just had a lot of energy today. They came home at 7, both of them laughing, both of them smiling. They'd caught 4 fish and David was already planning how he'd cook them. I stood in the kitchen doorway watching them, and I realized Marcus hadn't said anything. He'd kept the secret. 2 weeks later, Marcus moved out. He found a job in another city 3 hours away. He packed his stuff in one afternoon and left without really saying goodbye. Just a quick hug, a wave to the girls, and he was gone. David was sad to see his brother go. I was relieved. I thought it was over. I thought I could go back to my normal life and forget it ever happened. But 3 weeks after Marcus left, I found out I was pregnant. I knew immediately it could be Marcus's baby. The timing lined up. David and I had barely been intimate during those months, maybe once or twice. But Marcus and I had been together dozens of times. I didn't tell anyone. I went through the pregnancy in terror, praying every day that the baby would look like David, praying that I'd never have to explain, praying that my sin wouldn't show up in my child's face. I gave birth to a boy. We named him Jacob. And when the nurse handed him to me, I saw Marcus's face, his nose, his ears, his expression. David didn't notice. To him, Jacob just looked like a baby. But I knew. I knew every time I looked at my son that he was a living reminder of what I'd done. For years, I carried that secret. Jacob grew up thinking David was his father, and David loved him like his own son. Maybe even more than he loved the girls, because Jacob was his only boy. They'd play catch in the backyard. David taught him how to fix cars, how to throw a punch, how to be a man. And every single moment, I knew I was letting my husband pour his heart into a child that wasn't his. Marcus never came back to visit. He called David once or twice a year, short conversations. He never asked about me, never asked about the kids. It was like he'd erased us from his life. I thought I could live with the guilt forever. I thought it would just become part of me, like a scar that stops hurting after enough time. But secrets don't stay buried. Jacob was 19, a sophomore in college. He needed a blood transfusion after a car accident. Routine procedure. But they ran tests and something didn't match up. The hospital called us in for a meeting. They sat us down and told us very carefully that David could not be Jacob's biological father. The blood types didn't match. It was genetically impossible. I watched my husband's face as he processed the information, watched him do the math, watched him look at me with a question in his eyes, then confusion, then understanding, then devastation. He didn't yell, he didn't cry. He just stood up and walked out of the hospital. He got in his car and drove away. I sat in that cold hospital room with the doctor and the genetic counselor, and I felt my entire world collapse. David filed for divorce 3 days later. He moved out the same week. Emma and Sophie were furious with me. They were 25 and 27 by then, old enough to understand what I'd done, old enough to be disgusted. They sided with their father completely. They stopped calling, stopped visiting. I became a stranger to my own daughters. Jacob was destroyed. He confronted me, demanded to know who his real father was. I told him about Marcus. He called his uncle, the man he'd spoken to maybe 5 times in his life. Marcus confirmed it, said he'd suspected but never wanted to know for sure. Said he was sorry. Jacob cut me off too. Said he needed time to process everything. That was 14 years ago. I'm still waiting for him to call. But here's the part that keeps me awake at night. Here's the part that proves karma is real and justice finds everyone eventually. 5 years after the divorce, I got a call from Marcus. First time we'd spoken in decades. He was dying. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. He had maybe 6 months. He wanted to see me, said he needed to tell me something before he died. I drove 3 hours to his apartment. He looked so different, thin and gray and old. We were only in our 50s, but he looked 80. He told me he'd never forgiven himself for what we did,
that it had destroyed his ability to have relationships, to trust himself, to be happy. He'd spent 40 years alone because he couldn't look at himself in the mirror without seeing a man who'd betrayed his own brother. Then he told me the real secret, the one that shattered everything I thought I understood. He said David knew. David had always known. Marcus confessed to him that day they went fishing, told him everything about the affair, about his feelings for me, about how sorry he was. Marcus said David didn't get angry, didn't yell. He just sat there on the boat, staring at the water, processing it all. And David made a choice. He decided to forgive us both. He decided to stay in the marriage, to keep his family together, to raise Jacob as his own son, even knowing the truth. For 19 years, David knew Jacob wasn't his biological child, and he loved him anyway. He knew I'd betrayed him in the worst possible way, and he stayed. He swallowed that pain every single day for nearly 2 decades because he believed in keeping his family intact. And I never knew. I lived in fear for 19 years, while David lived with certainty and chose love anyway. He was a better person than I ever gave him credit for, a better person than I deserved. Marcus told me all this from his deathbed, and then he asked if I thought David would forgive him before he died. I told him I didn't know. I hadn't spoken to David in 5 years. I didn't have the right to speak for him. Marcus died 3 weeks later, alone. I didn't go to the funeral. Neither did Jacob. A year after that, I found out David had remarried a woman named Patricia. I saw photos on Facebook on Emma's page. They looked happy. Really happy. He looked younger somehow, lighter, like he had finally put down a weight he'd been carrying for decades. He never told the kids the truth. Never told them he'd known all along. He let them hate me completely, let me take all the blame. And he moved on with his life. Part of me hates him for that, but most of me understands it. I took 19 years of his life. He deserved to start fresh with a clean slate. I'm 71 now. I live alone. My daughters speak to me maybe twice a year, on holidays, out of obligation. Jacob hasn't called since that day in the hospital. David is living his life with a woman who didn't betray him. And I sit in this apartment every day, surrounded by photos of people who don't want me around, and I understand this is my ending. This is what I earned. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a movie scene where everyone cries and forgives each other. Just silence and loneliness, and the knowledge that I destroyed something beautiful for something temporary. The worst part isn't the loneliness, though. The worst part is knowing that David was strong enough to forgive me, and I was too weak to deserve it. He gave me 19 extra years of family, of normalcy, of mercy, and I never even knew to be grateful for it.
So that's my story. That's what 43 years of guilt looks like. I didn't tell you this because I want sympathy. I don't deserve sympathy. I told you this because I need someone to know the truth, the whole truth, not just about what I did, but about what happened after, about how David's mercy was wasted on me, about how Marcus died alone with his guilt, about how Jacob lost the only father he ever knew because I couldn't control myself for 3 months.
People always say that affairs are about sex or excitement or boredom, but that's not the whole truth. Affairs are about selfishness, about choosing your own feelings over everyone else's reality, about convincing yourself that your temporary happiness is worth their permanent pain. I chose wrong, and now I live with the consequences every single day. Every quiet morning, every silent dinner, every holiday spent alone. This is justice. This is what happens when you betray the people who love you most. If you're watching this and you're thinking about doing something similar, thinking about making the same choice I made, I'm begging you to stop. I'm begging you to think about what your life will look like in 40 years. Not in the moment when it feels exciting and alive, but in the decades after, when everyone you love has walked away and you're left with nothing but regrets and empty rooms. David gave me mercy I didn't deserve, and I squandered it. Don't make my mistake. Don't waste your life chasing a feeling that will fade in months while destroying relationships that took years to build. It's not worth it. Nothing is worth this. If this story hit you hard, watch the previous video.